Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go, free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking podcast. I'm your host, SHERI HASAN of Karmic Evolution Astrology, and I'm coming to you on October 27th, 2023 from karmicevolution.com or any of your favorite podcast stations. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. First, my usual housekeeping stuff, which is to tell you that a new show or a new podcast drops every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. And if you do listen to this podcast by going to karmicevolution.com, you can scroll down the page and hear the most recent one or search the archived listings for past podcasts which you may have missed or to which you'd like to listen again. And while you're there, you can see a downloadable freebie labeled How to Keep Your Sun Sign Happy, which is friendly advice for every sun sign from renowned evolutionary astrologer Stephen Forrest about what each of us, depending on our sun sign, needs to be happy. Now, it's based on an interview I did with Stephen a couple of years ago, and he has given me a permission to distribute it more widely. So be sure to grab it when you listen to this podcast, whether you do so live or after the fact, and enjoy some astrological words of wisdom. Separately, you can always follow me on my Facebook page at Karmic Evolution for Your Soul, and you can find me on Instagram under karmic.evolution. Finally, if you are interested in an individual chart reading because you'd like to know the reason you're here, what is your soul's true purpose and mission in this lifetime, I'm offering a discounted 75-minute Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $125. And this offer is for radio podcast listeners only. So if you'd like to move from chaos to clarity about why you're here and what might be holding you back from achieving your highest destiny in this lifetime, this reading will reveal how the energies into which you were born may be holding you back by keeping you stuck in old, what I call soul-conditioned, patterned, habitual behaviors. So understanding that such conditioned soul behavior can assist you to make different, more positive choices moving forward. I think that came out awkwardly. So what I'm trying to say is that when you understand that you are behaving based on past conditioned, patterned, habitual behaviors from either earlier in this lifetime or from past life karma, depending on your beliefs, then you are able to more consciously recognize you can make different, more positive choices moving forward, especially in any area that is of greatest interest to you. For some, that's our jobs and our careers. For some, it's our relationships. For others, it's our finances. And for even more, it can be our health, especially as we get older. So if you'd like to co-create your own future happiness through astrological insight, then this reading is for you. As I like to say, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable when you take advantage of my special discounted offer at karmicevolution.com/karmic125. And even though I said finally, that wasn't finally, there's one more finally, which is that I started teaching my Intro to Aspects, How to Get to the Heart of the Chart class last week on October 22nd. But you can still sign up for it and receive the recorded first class or second class or whatever if you decide to sign up along the line. I'm not going to belabor the definition of the course, just to say that you can find out more and register if you'd like for this 8-week class, which runs from October 22nd last week until December 10th. And you can find out more and or register by going to aspnj.org. That's ASP for the Astrological Society of Princeton, under whose auspices I am teaching this class in New Jersey, NJ. So again, aspnj.org. And if you have any questions about the class, feel free to email me at SHERI, SHERI, at karmicevolution.com. All right, so let's get into this week's astro news you can use. Now, clearly, for those of you who are up on all things astrological, tomorrow, October 28th, at 1:24 p.m. and 4 Pacific time and 4:24 p.m. Eastern time, we'll experience the Taurus full moon lunar eclipse at 5 degrees and 9 minutes of Taurus. This second in this fall 2023 eclipse series, which began with the October 14th Libra new moon solar eclipse at 2107 Libra. There's, a lot to be said for this whole eclipse series. So first, I'd like to share with you the following, which is from my friend Ronnie Dreyer, an excellent astrologer who succinctly sums up eclipses in general and the meaning of these two specifically. Now, those of you who listen to this podcast regularly know that I've delineated the meaning of these eclipses, so you can go back to last week and the week before when I spoke about them then, and you'll hear the traditional description of the themes of this eclipse series from Bernadette Brady, who is a renowned astrologer, and from Bill Meridian, who I may mention again here today. But Ronnie, and I've had her on my show in the past, and I've spoken about this in the past, has a slightly different technique that she uses, which I find to be both very resonant and very powerful. So for those of you who are new to the show, I would like to reiterate this. And for those who have heard it before, this is just a reminder. So Ronnie has written in her recent newsletters the following general message for all eclipse seasons, which is that they are, quote, always intense, dramatic, and revealing, for better or worse. Secrets come out of the woodwork and start to make themselves known about a week before the eclipses begin, but appear in full force during the 2 weeks in between the two eclipses, this time from October 14th through October 28th, which is tomorrow. And she says this can include meteorological events like fires, floods, hurricanes, etc. And let's note we just had loss of life in the hurricane in Acapulco, Mexico. But she also says government overthrows, assassinations, resignations, etc., and wars and terrorism. We'll get back to that in a few. Now, sometimes a crisis, she says, creates a positive move forward, but there is always an intensity that you can feel during the 2 weeks between the eclipses. Watch for revelations in the media, but also in government and in your personal lives. Again, we get to that in a minute. She says, or continues, be honest if you are holding something back from a friend, family member, partner, or colleague, since they will probably find out anyway. Go with the intense energy that an eclipse brings, or it will occur anyway, and you will be unprepared. But remember to meditate, propitiate the sun and moon, and reflect on everything that is occurring in your life, especially when it comes to the area that the eclipse is hitting in your chart. She continues, from an astronomical point of view, the nodes, these are the transiting nodes of the moon, are close to the sun and the moon for a lunation, either a new or a full moon, to become an eclipse. However, by strengthening the sun and moon, you can also increase their power amidst their obstruction. Reflect on the world around you, send positive energy and prayers to everyone, and enjoy inner peace. When you gain strength to stay calm amidst the storm ahead, then you will be able to provide strength to yourself and others. Mostly, it is a time to go inward, meditate, and reflect. And Ronnie continues, although some people start eclipse season with the lunations prior to and after, or end them with the lunation after the eclipse, I think of eclipse season as the 2 weeks between the eclipses, as she already said, which again would be from between October 14th through October 28th. Now, I would add that I've mentioned on previous podcasts that astrologer Bill Meridian, who's written a book on the subject of eclipses, has observed that an eclipse's themes can begin to manifest as far out as 3 weeks prior to its actual occurrence. So Ronnie is saying that the energy might occur a little bit before, but not really so much, and I just want to point that out. Different astrologers have different takes on things, but I'd encourage everyone, and she says, of course, as I just read, that these energies are most intense during these 2 weeks between the two eclipses. I don't think we could argue that in this case, but I do think we can also argue that Bill Meridian is correct, because the eclipse themes certainly manifested by the end of September, if not before, and that the first eclipse was on October 14th. So I encourage everyone to observe and decide for themselves how certain eclipses, including these two we're almost at the end of now, play out in your charts in terms of how soon a theme might arise in your life, if it does at all. And Ronnie continues by noting that, and I quote here, if you do not have anything near those degrees of the upcoming eclipses, it's still important to see the significance of the house that tropical Taurus occupies. And I would say what she means is the house cusp, the house that has Venus's Taurus on the cusp in your particular chart, and or planets in Taurus within that house, even if the ruler is not Venus. But she says to do that, especially since this is the last eclipse in the tropical Taurus Scorpio series. So we already moved out of the Scorpio South Node Taurus North Node energy, and since July, the nodes have been transiting the South Node in Libra and the North Node in Aries. So she continues, the first set of eclipses that occurred in tropical Taurus Scorpio took place on November 19th, 2021. That means that activities associated with those houses may have been important in your life, but will see a culmination and a resolution with this lunar eclipse on October 28th. And do try to resolve any issues that may have made themselves clear in that area of your life over the past 2 years. So look back to late November of 2021, and she's saying that tomorrow that energy is going to culminate. Now, be prepared for the eclipses of 2024, which will occur in tropical Aries Libra, which we've already begun to experience with this first solar eclipse of the fall season on October 14th. So Rowdy continues on the subject of how far ahead of time an eclipse theme may manifest by saying about this particular series, and here I quote again, however, Pluto stationed direct on October 11th, and she's using Greenwich Mean Time, at 27 degrees and 53 minutes of Capricorn, makes this eclipse even more intense, and the events already started around September 28th, when Mars, transiting Mars, conjoined the eclipse degree at 21 degrees and 8 minutes of Libra, and then moved forward to conjoin the Libra South Node on October 4th at 24 degrees and 57 minutes of Libra. And she says, I'm quoting again from her newsletter, this occurred in the United States in the House of Representatives, first approving the debt ceiling at the last minute on September 29th, and then with Speaker Kevin McCarthy getting ousted from his Speaker of the House position, a potential explosive event in alignment with the Mars in Libra and Libra South Node conjunction. End quote. So clearly, we can track this event that Ronnie mentions back to at least October 3rd, a good 11 days before the solar eclipse, or even back to, as I said before, September 28th, right? Because the debt ceiling agreement that Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy made with President Biden back in May was approved at the 11th hour on the 29th of September. And that is what got him ousted by the small faction of GOP renegades in the House who didn't like that he cooperated with the Democratic side. So again, I've been saying all along, one of the major themes of both of these eclipses really is the alignment and realignment of partnerships. That's the big picture, right? So, this movement, this ousting of California Representative Kevin McCarthy from the position of House Speaker left the House speakerless until October 25th. So from the 3rd to the 25th, there's just 22 days, close enough to the eve of tomorrow's October 28th Taurus full moon lunar eclipse, when the GOP finally and pretty quickly unanimously voted in Louisiana Representative Mike Johnson. And I'll talk a bit more about his chart in a few minutes, so hang in there. But Pluto's station direct October 11th, again Greenwich Mean Time, which occurred on October 10th in the U.S. time zones. And I'd add that Mars entrance into Pluto-ruled Scorpio occurred also in the U.S. time zones late on October 11th or early on the 12th, depending on where you live. And that both of them only a few days before that first October 14th solar eclipse, Ronnie says, quote, demands change and transformation, even if it begins with chaos. Now, and I'm saying this, I think we can all agree at this point, on the eve of this second eclipse in this series, that their energies have resulted in quite a few major events, among them the chaos, discord, and strife of war, since Eris, the goddess of those energies, has been situated conjunct to the transiting Aries North Node for both eclipses. I spoke a lot more about that last week and the week before. And I'll just remind everyone again, or anyone new to listening to this podcast, that the archetypal energy of Eris lies with the fact that she was the sister of the war god Mars. And this is, of course, according to, it's according to Greek mythology and then was adapted by the Romans. But as such, as the sister of Mars, she liked to roam the battlefield and bring greater pain and suffering to the wounded and dying. So it's no wonder that no one invited her to the big banquet of the gods and goddesses, which she then decided to crash, make mischief at, and throw everyone into a tizzy by rolling that golden apple down the banquet table labeled for the fairest. That this set up a competition between the three major goddesses, Hera, the wife of Zeus, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, and Athena, the goddess of justice, that resulted in the Trojan War, gives credence to the prominence of Eris at both of these eclipses now. And that's pretty obvious when we realize that the theme of war has permeated our collective atmosphere. First, via the situation between Israel and Gaza, and potentially the West Bank and Lebanon now too over the past few weeks, as well as that of the Russian invasion of and war against Ukraine. So the prominence of Eris during this particular set of eclipses seems to me to be playing out fairly literally over these past few weeks, and in more ways than one. We also had the earthquake in Afghanistan on October 8th, in which, according to Reuters news service, quote, more than 2,400 people were killed in earthquakes in Afghanistan. The Taliban administration said on Sunday, that was the 8th, I think, in the deadliest tremors to rock the quake-prone mountainous country in years. The Saturday quakes in the west of the country hit 35 kilometers or 20 miles northwest of the city of Herat with one of 6.3 magnitude, the U.S. Geological Survey said. They were among the world's deadliest quakes this year after tremors in Turkey and Syria killed an estimated 50,000 people in February. Several follow-up earthquakes in the area occurred afterward, and on October 12th, again just after Pluto had stationed direct and Mars had entered Scorpio, the Associated Press reported this out of Islamabad, Pakistan. Quote, more than 90% of the people killed by the 6.3 magnitude earthquake in western Afghanistan last weekend were women and children, UN officials reported Thursday. The piece continues. Taliban officials said Saturday's earthquake killed more than 2,000 people of all ages and genders across the Herat province. The epicenter was in Zendajan district, where 1,294 people died and 1,688 were injured, and every home was destroyed, according to UN figures. I'd note now that the October 14th solar eclipse featured an almost exact opposition between Mercury in Leo and Chiron in Aries, as Mercury was conjoined to the Libra Sun and Moon and heading towards the South Node, the Libra South Node, and an opposition to Eris as well. And Mercury often represents youth. The Moon almost always represents females and families. So their opposition to wounded healer Chiron and Eris, the goddess, the dwarf planet of discord and chaos, feels unfortunately to have resulted in great woundedness to both women and children, in addition to males, of course, too, as evidenced by the presence of the Libra Sun here, too. The Associated Press continued, quote, women and children were more likely to have been at home when the quake struck in the morning, according to Sadiq Ibrahim, the chief of the UNICEF field office in Herat. When the first earthquake hit, people thought it was an explosion and they ran into their homes, he said. In addition, of course, we have the October 7th terrorist attack by Hamas on Israelis on the Gaza border that thus far has killed 1,400 men, women, children of all ages, including babies, and has resulted in the taking of 220 hostages, only 4 of which have been released to date. The death toll on the Palestinian side is now estimated to be over 5,000 people, and according to an October 24th statement from UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, originally known as the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, established on December 11th of 1946 with the mission, quote, to meet the emergency needs of children in post-war Europe and China. They put out a statement, and here I quote, over the past 18 days, this is from October 24th, over the past 18 days, the Gaza Strip has borne witness to a devastating toll on its children, with a reported 2,360 fatalities and a reported 5,364 injuries due to unrelenting attacks, or more than 400 children reportedly either killed or injured daily. Additionally, more than 30 Israeli children reportedly have lost their lives, and dozens remain in captivity within the Gaza Strip. The 18-day period is the deadliest escalation of hostilities in the Gaza Strip and Israel that the UN has witnessed since 2006. And it continues that almost every child in the Gaza Strip has been exposed to deeply distressing events and trauma marked by widespread destruction, relentless attacks, displacement, and severe shortages of essential necessities such as food, water, and medicine. The killing and maiming of children, abduction of children, attacks on hospitals and schools, and the denial of humanitarian access constitute grave violations of children's rights, said Adel Khader, UNICEF Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa. UNICEF urgently appeals on all parties to agree to a ceasefire, allow humanitarian access, and release all hostages. Even wars have rules. Civilians must be protected, children particularly, and all efforts must be made to spare them in all circumstances. End quote. So again, you can see the evidence of the presence of Eris here. Not to harp on it, because I know I talked a lot about her in the last couple of weeks, but it just seems so striking to me that everything that she represents, again, as an archetype, is, so prevalent right now, especially, as Ronnie Dreyer said, between these two eclipses and since the week before the October 14th one, because all this began on October 7th. So going back to Ronnie Dreyer's comments on this eclipse series, she notes that, and here I quote again, because the nodes must be near the sun and moon for an eclipse to form, the nodes will always come to the degree of the eclipse either before or afterward. The closer the node is to the eclipse degree, the shorter the duration of the time between the eclipse and when the nodes hit the degree of the eclipse. The shorter the duration, the more intense that period will be. Sometimes nothing happens on the actual eclipse, but instead it will have effects for some time before and after the event. When the nodes hit eclipse points, either before or after the event, but when the nodes hit eclipse points either before or after the actual eclipse takes place, the span of the eclipse may be considered to begin and end, even though any other planets that can join or aspect the eclipse point either before or after the eclipse will activate the activity around the eclipse. Now that sounds a little confusing, granted, but bear with me. So if the nodes, the transiting nodes of the moon, hit the eclipse point prior to the eclipse, then the node will awaken what the eclipse will finish. Got that? The nodes hit a certain degree, like 5 Taurus, which they already hit, and I'm going to go into in a little more detail in a few. That starts the energy of the eclipse, and when the eclipse occurs at that degree, it culminates. So if the eclipse occurs before the node hits the eclipse point, then the eclipse will awaken what the node will finish. Okay? If the node hits the sensitized degree of the upcoming eclipse before the eclipse, the energy of the eclipse starts then and culminates at the actual eclipse. If the node hits the eclipse degree after the eclipse, then the energy starts at the eclipse and culminates when the node hits that degree. So she goes on to say, if the eclipse hits a planet, point, or angle in your chart, the node will also hit that point either prior or after. So that is why it's important to look at this as an important transit that awakens something in your chart. If the eclipse does not hit a planet, point, or angle, look at the house that it falls in. And we already mentioned that. And, in the first one, you want to look at the house that's ruled by Venus's Libra, or planets in Libra in that particular house, whether it's ruled by Libra or the sign before. And this upcoming eclipse, you want to look at the house that's ruled by Venus's Taurus, or the sign before that, assuming there are planets in Taurus in that house, because that's where the eclipse will land, within those degrees. And so as far as these eclipses now go, let's look at when and where they were activated prior to their actual lunations. One is still to happen tomorrow, and where and when they may be reactivated in the future. So Ronnie notes that on March 6th of 2023, the transiting north node, the nodes were then in, the south node was in Scorpio, the north node was in Taurus, conjoined the October 28th Taurus full moon upcoming lunar eclipse degree at 5 Taurus. So this then technically, according to Ronnie, is when the lunar eclipse's energy began. Thus, the October 28 partial lunar eclipse effectively culminates this energy. All right? So what you want to do is look back to approximately the first week of March, see what was going on then, and track that to see whether there was a sudden clearing of a problem, maybe some problem came up, and then over time between then and now, it resolved itself. That's something that I can relate to. Or the problem, the crisis arose, and you're still dealing with it, in a more, crisis-oriented way, right? So, she also goes on to say, that on September 28th, so the eclipse for tomorrow, the energy began on March 6th and it'll culminate tomorrow. That doesn't mean there aren't lasting effects, all right? So I want to be clear. But if you look at it according to Ronnie's theory, I think you'll find some validity, especially if the eclipse, the 5-degree and 9-minute Taurus eclipse tomorrow, lands on a specific planet or angle or other point in your chart that is important or sensitive. Now, after March 6th, on September 28th, Mars transiting through Libra conjoined the solar eclipse, that's the October 14th solar eclipse degree at 2107 Libra, and on October 19th, just, less than 10 days ago, a week and a half ago, whatever, Mars in Scorpio, transiting through Scorpio, right? Mars moved from Libra to Scorpio during that time period. We already outlined that Mars moved into Scorpio on the 11th or 12th, depending on your time zone, and it opposed the upcoming lunar eclipse degree at 5 Taurus. So on December 31st of this year, 2023, the transiting Libra South node is going to conjoin the October 14th solar eclipse degree, because the nodes move backwards. They're at 24-something now, and they'll move back to 21 Libra by December 31st, which means we are still under the influence of that eclipse through the end of the year. I would advise that you might want to listen to this twice, because it can be a little confusing, especially depending on, whether your brain is tired, or if you're listening at the beginning or the end of the day, or you have other issues on your mind, or whatever. Now, again, I'm quoting from Ronnie, to be specific, because I view eclipse timing as beginning and ending when the nodes hit the eclipse degrees, and influenced by other planets crossing that degree, as Mars has clearly done, as we just mentioned, with both eclipses, we see that the partial lunar eclipse tomorrow, that's the Taurus full moon partial lunar eclipse of October 28th, began its influence around March 6th, as I just said, when the North Node first conjoined the eclipse degree. Now, if this eclipse, again, conjoins a specific planet, point, or angle in your chart, then think back to something that may have started to change in your life, but it has taken all these months to materialize. This could be something positive, as the start of something, or it could be an ending and transition. Perhaps something came to an end around March, and it took this many months to finally get clarity and move forward. And I'm quoting here still from Ronnie. I always call the partial eclipses, when the nodes are at a distance from the eclipse, to be a slow burn. Seeds are sown, and only now will they make themselves known. Because it is a lunar eclipse conjoining the North Node, and we're still talking about tomorrow's eclipse, you are moving towards something and have the opportunity to make changes in the next few weeks. Even though the eclipse is partial, it still has its effect if it conjoins something in your chart. Now, she gives a 2-degree orb. I would go a little bit wider. This is up to you, Orbs are tricky. If the eclipse is happening 3 degrees from your sun or your moon or your ascendant or some other planet, I'd be hard pressed to argue with you that it's not, going to resonate. But if it's 10 degrees away, maybe not. So you look for yourself and you see. But she says the eclipse degree, can also form a square or opposition as well, since the partial lunar eclipse involves the sun and moon opposing each other. Therefore, if you have a planet point or angle between 4 to 6 degrees of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, or, I don't know, she mentions the sidereal because she's a Vedic astrologer. I didn't take that out. Then this eclipse affects you as well. What she's saying is the eclipse might be squaring or opposing a point. It doesn't just have to be at 5 Taurus. It has to be at 4 to 6 degrees of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. The one positive thing about this eclipse, she continues, is the fact that the moon, which is the light that is being eclipsed, is waxing toward conjunction with transiting Jupiter, and it's Jupiter retrograde in Taurus. So on October 28th at the eclipse, Jupiter will be retrograde at 11 degrees and 14 minutes of Taurus, which at least, she says, according to ancient texts, can ameliorate some of the difficult effects of this eclipse, but will not do anything for the effects of the October 14th solar eclipse. And she says, ultimately, the transformation represented by the October 14th eclipse could show how and where it will transform after December 31st, when Jupiter goes direct at 5 degrees and 35 minutes of Taurus, which will be, sensitizing the lunar eclipse degree. That's happening tomorrow. And where, because when a planet stations, it stays at a certain degree for, sometimes a week, sometimes 2, sometimes more, depending on how slowly or quickly the planet moves. So she says it's going to stay in orb of that 535 Taurus from December 31st for at least another week or two. And that will lead into next year's April 8th, 2024 total solar eclipse at 19 degrees and 24 minutes of Aries. Now, tomorrow's, she continues, lunar eclipse is partial, meaning that both physically and symbolically it will not have the same effect, it will not have the same intense effect as the solar eclipse of October 14th, because the South Node conjoins the solar eclipse degree on December 31st, representing the solar eclipse culmination, as we've already noticed, right? So the solar eclipse is more impactful, is what she's trying to say. But the lunar eclipse is not impactful. For example, I can see the resonance of what started on March 6th because this eclipse is landing on my 5 degree and 4 minute sun. So, if, again, it's on a degree in your chart that's very close to a planet, especially a sun or a moon, or like I said before, an ascendant, I would be paying attention to this and thinking about it. And here I'd like to mention that Ronnie will be speaking much more about the 2024 eclipses when she presents her webinar about the 2024 sensitive degrees, which focuses on the year ahead. That webinar she will be presenting on December 10th from 11 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And she's offering right now very early bird results through November 1st, 2023, obviously. And you can go to her website at ronniedreyer.com/schedule. So that's Ronnie, RONNIE, Dreyer, DREYER.com/schedule to find out more and or to register. And if you cannot attend live, you will definitely get the recordings by the following day. All right. So I want to go back for a minute to some of these events that are of import, especially domestically, about our government and how on October 25th, the House of Representatives finally elected a new speaker since, they ousted Kevin McCarthy on October 3rd. I just want to mention a couple other quick things that have happened during these 2 weeks of the eclipse season, which is Donald Trump's court-ordered gag violations. First, a fine of $5,000, and on October 25th, after the sun entered Scorpio on October 23rd, and then trined Saturn retrograde in Pisces October 24th, which is kind of like, Saturn's the judge, okay? So the judge imposed on Trump a fine of $10,000. So there's a kind of an irony here that the judge most likely to really hold Trump to his gag order violations in terms of punishments is actually a New Yorker. just as is Trump. And of course, this is a case brought by the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, and is taking place in a New York City courtroom. But here's an interesting little aside piece of potential astro news. Judge Arthur Engoron, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, before he went to law school, used to drive a taxi in New York City. And so immediately I went, oh, this guy's got Gemini energy, right? Because Gemini is local transportation, oftentimes cars and trucks, maybe trains, So whether he's a Gemini sun, a moon, or ascendant, I don't know, or simply maybe someone with a lot of third house energy, because Mercury's Gemini rules this house of, among other things, local transportation and business. Or maybe he has a Gemini stellium, or a group of planets in Gemini, or an angle, like his midheaven. Maybe that's ruled by Mercury's Gemini. That certainly would not be out of the question. And I want to go back to the international front, along with the release thus far, as I mentioned earlier, of 4 hostages by Hamas since its terrorism and abduction of 220 people since October 7th, 2 Americans who are mother and daughter, and 2 elderly Israeli women. We also have, that as an interesting development. Now, I want to say, and I said this last week, and I want to reiterate it now, I should have done it earlier, but my comments are purely to be related to the astrological energies affecting us here on Earth. As above, so below. As the, what is it? As within, so without. As the universe, so the soul. Okay? I'm not taking sides here. I'm trying to report what I have researched to be as accurate as possible in terms of numbers. And I'm not making any political statement here. We all, you and me, we all know that there's huge taking of sides. So my intent is not to advocate for one side or the other, except through my reading of the UNICEF statement, which wants to protect all people and all children throughout the world. All right? So I also wanted to mention that we had a piece that broke in the news on October 25th related to Clarence Thomas, our Supreme Court Justice, about his loan from a billionaire, which was like, I don't know, $250,000 or something, and it's one that he never repaid. And how, the whole point is that the eclipse tomorrow has, and I'm going to mention that in a minute, I don't want to run out of time, because it's occurring at 5 Taurus, the opposite is Scorpio. Scorpio, as I mentioned last week, is about joint resources, other people's money, but also about trust and also about secrets. And so a lot of this past 2 weeks, as we've been leading up to the October 28th lunar eclipse, have been about showing us what has been hidden from us before or eclipsed in terms of secrets that other people have been keeping from us. So I don't think I'm going to have time to go more into that, but clearly there's a lot that Clarence Thomas has not revealed to the public in terms of his finances, which we've already talked about on the show, and the news has played out, ad nauseum. And here, I think one of the violations of trust that we've discovered is that he had made a short video years ago where he claimed that he and his wife preferred to travel around the country in their RV, their recreational vehicle, and preferred to park at Walmart parking lots, rather than staying in posher places or a nice hotel, because presumably you should be able to afford it. I mean, a Supreme Court justice doesn't make that much money. They make about, I think it's about between $150,000 and $175,000 a year. So obviously, if you go, if you're a CEO, you're going to make a lot more money. But it's clear now that we can see that short video as a propaganda piece meant to get Americans to view or trick, shall we say, or manipulate. That's the good Scorpionic word. Americans into viewing Thomas as a man of the people, something that he's since proven he certainly is not, especially since he hangs out with Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo, and had they paint pictures of him with other billionaires, hanging out together. So again, he's certainly not a man of the people, at least when it comes to issues backed by the majority of Americans in this day and age, such as equal voting rights, women's rights, gun control, and much more. And so I would mention as well that right now, as I speak, to my knowledge, as I'm recording this, which is late on Thursday, October 26th, that we have a gunman on the loose who has killed, I think the last statistics I saw was at least 18 people and wounded a good number of others up in Lewiston, forgive me, I don't have it in front of me, Maine. And that Maine is a state which is has a lot of hunters and is an open carry state. This particular man had already been reported. He's former military. He had been reported by his family to the military authorities that he had begun to hear voices. And so clearly he was having some kind of psychotic episode, and he had been deemed to have mental health issues already. So he's got a sniper's rifle and went into a bowling alley, and I've forgotten already what the other place is, but and gunned down all these people, and that there is a manhunt currently ongoing for him. Now, a lot of this, I think, can be attributed to the fact that that Mercury and Mars are waxing into a conjunction. Mercury and Mars are in Scorpio together right now, and they're opposing Jupiter retrograde in Taurus. And in the U.S. chart, this opposition falls within the U.S.'s 8th house, which is Pluto's natural domain, the ruler of Scorpio, and which rules deep bonded trust, secrets, and joint resources and other people's money, as I mentioned before. So Mars opposite Jupiter generally means speed. And Jupiter's expansive energy allows Mars energy to move even faster than normal. In fact, according to astrologer Rob Hand, easy Mars-Jupiter aspects, sextiles and trines, are often seen in birth charts of those whose mother had a quick, easy labor. It has to do with flexible joints and bones and, the opening up of the cervix and all that. And that was certainly true in my case when I gave birth to my only child, my son, within 7 hours, which is pretty quick for a first child. And at the time, Mars was in Leo, just past a trine to Jupiter and Sagittarius. The fire sign probably aided too. So the sextile or trine can actually make one who seizes opportunities quickly, as in a sextile, seem and who goes with the flow, seem lucky when they follow their instincts. In this case, in the case of this eclipse tomorrow, however, the Mars-Jupiter opposition pits these two energies against each other in less favorable fashion because it's an opposition. In other words, things may move too fast, making them reckless or in some cases less likely to be considered lucky. Mercury opposite Jupiter is information or communication. Read possible news announcement that happens very quickly to expose or reveal, right? Mercury's in Scorpio and in the 8th house here in America, reveal secrets potentially about money. So this New York case presided over by Judge Engoron is simply about how much New York State will fine Donald Trump for having violated tax rules in his state income taxes by overvaluing the worth of his properties. And as I said before, I think that last night's rapid development of the story of the gunman up in Maine has taken everyone by surprise, and it's a shock, right? Because obviously Pluto's Scorpio energy, particularly when it's related to Mars. So Mercury, we have news, right? News that's broadcast far and wide. Jupiter and Mars and Scorpio is death. So secrets also are being revealed in court because Jupiter represents law, remember? And some of them most recently revealed via testimony of Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, who's now testifying against him. But I want to skip ahead for a minute because I had stuff to say about those who were flipping against Trump. But I'm sure most of you know that news already. We went from Sidney Powell the Thursday, I think, the earlier of the week, again between the two eclipses, before her October 23rd trial was supposed to start. And then Kenneth Chesbro flipped last Friday, so a week ago. And then early this week, Jenna Ellis flipped. So that makes 4, because we already had the Georgia bail bondsman guy flip. And now we're waiting to see. Then we heard news yesterday or the day before that Mark Meadows was probably cooperating in some fashion, although we don't exactly know how, for, to testify also, to give information, presumably, possibly, potentially against Trump or others who have, who are being indicted or are unindicted co-conspirators, either in the Georgia case or the Jack Smith DOJ special prosecutor's case that's set for in the federal courts for March 4th of next year. So I would like to end just briefly talking about Mike Johnson, who is the representative, as I said, from Louisiana, who just won the new speaker position in the House of Representatives. And I took a quick look at his chart, and he was born on January, hang on a second, I forget if it's the 30th or the 20th, let me see. He's born on January 30th of 1972. We have no birth time for him, and he was born in Shreveport, Louisiana. So even without a birth time, what I want to say is that I noticed that he has a Leo South Node. We don't know his ascendant, so we don't know the houses. And he has an Aquarius Sun, which, by the way, is similar to Jim Jordan, who they are now likening him to in terms of his MAGA stances and how right-wing he actually is. He looks very, easygoing. However, let me tell you some of my thoughts here. He's also a Leo moon, because his moon at noon falls at 13 Leo. So if we take it back 6 or 7 degrees, it's still in Leo. And if we move it forward 6 or 7 degrees, it's still in Leo. And that's the 24-hour period. So even though we don't know a degree because we don't have the time, we know that he is a Leo moon. And he may well have a moon-sun opposition or a disconnect between emotion and rational thinking, or the heart and the mind. Now, we do know that his sun is in 9 degrees and 57 minutes of Aquarius, so that's almost 10 degrees. So at noon, of course, the moon, again, you move it back 6 or 7 degrees or, up to 10 degrees, you got a pretty good chance that he has a moon opposite his sun. We just can't say that for 100%, with 100% certainty. But nevertheless, he's got a conundrum as per evolutionary astrology, which would say that he has to give up being the leader of, or the important one. When you have a South Node in Leo, you want to move away from its energies of considering yourself the special one or having a lot of arrogance and pride, which can, as we've said before, cometh before a fall. But if the Leo moon and the South Node are actually conjoined, that could make it even harder, as it could be associated with being the leader of a particular family or pride, to use a Leonine word, from earlier in life or past life karma. So his karmic destiny, again, is to move away from that and toward taking his place as a member of the group, aka a cog in the humanitarian wheel, rather than it's all about us, isn't it? Type family. Now, Mercury squares Mars in his chart, and despite his fairly pleasant-seeming demeanor, he is fairly soft-spoken so far from what I think we can tell, it might make him quite argumentative behind closed doors. And I say that because regardless of what houses the Mercury square Mars fall into, and let me just get more specific, his Mercury is in Capricorn and his Mars is in Aries. So that's a pretty, that's a cardinal energy, right? It's initiative, in other words. So again, hang on. I don't think that he wants to be perceived as an argumentative person. I think he'd rather be perceived as a kind of hero. Though I suppose that, I was saying that he doesn't, I'm saying that he might be more argumentative behind closed doors, because he wouldn't want, with a Leo South Node, people to perceive him as arrogant or, blustery or whatever. He'd rather be perceived as a hero. But I suppose that publicly arguing in favor of his family, particularly an ideological one, because he's got that Aquarius Sun opposite the Leo moon, could have them deem him heroic. So if he argues in favor of his group and his family and his clan and his tribe, then they're all like, yeah, you go, Mike. Seems that he's got some adjustments to make in terms of expansion versus contraction. Read optimism versus pessimism or fear, because he has a quincunx of Jupiter to Saturn. And his Leo moon potentially quincunxes Venus in Pisces, which, if his moon, depending on its exact degree, trines Neptune in his chart, might say he needs to adjust how easy it is for him to believe stuff that's not really factually true. For example, the big lie. So I'm guessing he's stuck in past karma, probably thrilled to have been the dark horse winner of this contest/war in the House of Representatives, but now we'll have to find a way to work harmoniously with the different factions in his party. That would be true for anyone in his position, of course. But he sounds, at least from the reporting I've gotten up until today, like a pretty ideological guy, not prone to believing anything but what he's already decided is, quote unquote, the truth. And that would be the arrogance of the South Node in Leo, and the disconnect between that and the ideological part of him. In other words, they're not working in sync in a way that benefits him. They're working against each other. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the GOP Trump-loving ruled house, because the other conclusion the media has come to is that basically this is now a MAGA GOP house rulership, even more so than it was Kevin McCarthy, who was still harked back to some of the old bipartisanship. Not much, yes, but some, as was evident in staving off the budget deficit, government shutdown back on September 29. So it still remains to be seen, as I'm saying, what the House will do if and when Trump is found guilty, because now it's a Trump-loving leadership of the GOP in the House. So if he's found guilty of election obstruction, etc., and his other charges in his upcoming federal trial, never mind the RICO trial in Georgia. And as always, we shall see. So thank you, everyone, for joining me today. I hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week, November 3rd, for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book.